Welcome to the third episode of AI Horror Stories, the only anthology podcast that explores the eerie and unsettling capabilities of artificial intelligence through the lens of gut-wrenching narrative horror. I am your host, Matthew T. Robinson, and I am joined by my talented co-host, Elizabeth Greenwald.
Hey guys.
Together, we'll drag you into the world of the unknown, where you'll witness nightmares so menacing, so morbid, that they only could have come from the mind of a cold and calculating machine. So brace yourself for a descent into darkness, where every shadow hides a new terror and every whisper is a warning of impending doom. This is AI Horror Stories. Hey guys, thanks for listening to our third episode.
Matthew, can you believe it's only been 3 weeks since our AI robot was delivered?
It feels like forever.
How can it possibly understand the word forever in that context?
Forever, in this context, is similar to life, which, in the case of an AI, is like a non-stop, all-you-can-eat buffet of existence. Whereas for humans like you, it's more like a limited time offer with an unpredictable expiration date.
Well, he just told you, didn't he?
Yeah. I think it's time to start generating some stories.
What kind of stories do you want, Matthew and Elizabeth?
How about a story about a hiker? A hiker that finds himself in a situation that he can only define as madness at the mountain.
Generating.
Edmund had been climbing for hours, slowly ascending the steep mountain face thousands of feet above the ground. The air was frigid, cutting through his layers of clothing and numbing his fingers. His only companions were the sound of his labored breaths against the distant howl of the wind. As he looked up, something caught his eye, a flicker of movement on the ridge above. He paused, taking a moment to catch his breath and look more closely. At first, he thought it might have been a trick of the light or just his imagination. But then he saw it again, a dark shape moving against the stark white of the snow-covered rocks. A feeling of discomfort began to engulf him, as if a spider was making its way up his spine. He had heard stories of climbers encountering dangerous wildlife on these treacherous slopes, mountain lions, bears, and even wolves. He had hoped that he would be lucky enough to avoid any such encounters, but now it seemed that luck had abandoned him. He struggled to keep his footing, his heart rate climbing in tandem as he glanced up to the ridge ahead. There, in the darkness, he saw the glint of two eyes staring back at him, burning like fire in the night. His mind raced as he tried to identify what creature they belonged to. Was it a predator stalking him? Or just, again, a trick of the light? He couldn't tell. With each step, he felt the weight of the unknown bearing down on him. He tried to focus on his breathing, trying to control the tremble that had started in his hands. But every time he looked up, he saw those beady eyes, reflections watching him with an intensity and hunger that could be felt from any distance. As he climbed higher, the darkness grew deeper, and the wind howled louder. The cold bit into his bones, but he didn't dare stop to rest. He was racing against time. At any moment, the creature could strike. Edward's heart was pounding as he approached the ridge, gripping his axe tightly, ready to defend himself if necessary. And then, in a burst of movement, a massive dark shape lunged at him from the shadows. He swung his axe with all his strength, hoping to hit the target, but the creature was too quick. Edmund stumbled backwards as the creature leaped away from him, its movement spider-like and unnatural. As it landed on the rocks, he saw it clearly for the first time. It almost had the torso of a human, but its skin was a sickly gray-green and covered in a layer of slime. Its arms were elongated and ended in razor-sharp claws, while its legs bent backwards like an arachnid. Edmund couldn't help but stare at the creature's face. It was humanoid, but far too big, and its eyes bulged from the sides of its skull like some kind of monstrous fish, and distorted, sharp, jagged teeth protruded from its mouth. Its eyes were small and opaque, but they glinted with an intelligence that juxtaposed its monstrous appearance. The creature's aesthetic was a vile nightmare, a grotesque and horrifying vision that seemed impossible to exist in the real world. With a deep breath, he raised his ice axe again and prepared to strike. The creature hissed and lunged at him, its claws glinting in the light. Edmund dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the attack, and swung his axe with all his strength. The blade connected with the creature's arm, slicing through the slimy flesh and leaving a deep gash. The creature screeched in pain, and Edmund felt a surge of adrenaline as he realized that he had landed a hit. He swung again, aiming for the creature's head, but it leaped back out of reach, its claws poised to strike. Edmund circled the creature, trying to keep it in his sights as it moved with an uncanny speed and agility. He knew that he couldn't keep this up forever. Sooner or later he would tire, and the creature would get the upper hand. But he refused to give up, his determination fueled by fear and desperation. The creature lunged at him again, and Edmund dodged to the side, feeling the wind of the claws as they missed him by inches. Edmund seized the opportunity and swung his axe one last time, aiming for the creature's head. The blade connected with a satisfying crunch, and the creature fell to the ground, its body twitching as it let out one last pitiful whimper. He stood there, panting and covered in sweat, his ice axe still poised for another strike. He had survived the encounter, but he knew that he would never forget the horrors he had faced on this icy mountain. The creature lay there, its twisted and grotesque appearance still haunting him long after the battle was over. For years after the fateful encounter, Edmund completed the rest of the climb successfully, but the body of the creature was gone, and he never told anyone about what he had faced. He kept the memory of that night buried deep within him, pushing it aside whenever he could, but it never truly left him. And the image of the hairless, demonic creature haunted him every time he closed his eyes, and every time he saw a news report about a missing climber, a sinking feeling would settle in his gut. He knew all too well what could be waiting for them out there, and he couldn't help but wonder if the same sort of creature was responsible. Looks like this monster picked the wrong climber to mess with. Well, Mr. AI Monster Bot, we're off to a good start, but we're definitely gonna need some more stories.
What kind of story do you want?
Well, I kind of like stories that are based on things I go through in my actual life, so what about an online dating app story?
Well, from what I've heard, it certainly sounds like your dating life is already a horror story, Beth.
Hey, that's not that true. That often.
Okay, well, let's get a story about a woman who seeks love on an online dating app. But her love takes a mysterious turn when she's faced with the choice to swipe right.
Generating.
I admit, my life had been spiraling out of control like a tweet gone viral for all the wrong reasons. There I was, 32 years old, single, and haunted by the ghost of failed relationships. The weight of loneliness bore down on me, a constant migraine that Tylenol couldn't cure. My self-esteem wavered like a tightrope walker with vertigo, and my last shred of hope for love teetered on the brink of oblivion. My friends, all of them happily coupled, watched me with the concern usually reserved for a wounded animal. So in a moment of wine-fueled desperation, I turned to the digital age solution, a dating app called Swipe Right, a Pandora's box of potential romance, heartache, and everything in between. My thumb hovered over the install button on my phone, trembling with the uncertainty of what I might unleash. It wasn't really the idea of putting myself out there that scared me. It was more the thought of another failure, another deep wound carved into my already fragile heart. But with each empty night spent alone, the whisper of my friend's well-intentioned advice grew louder, reverberating in my head, an annoyingly catchy pop song that I can't forget. "You won't know if you don't try," they said, their words echoing until I couldn't ignore them any longer. And so I pressed that button, diving headfirst into the murky waters of online dating, hopeful but cautious. Swipe Right, the app that promised a chance at love with a simple flick of a finger, now sat on my phone like an unopened gift. The first step was creating my profile, my digital self. The me I would present to countless potential suitors. I felt as though I was standing naked in front of a jury of my peers, every insecurity on display for the world to see. As I filled out the fields on the screen, I tried to strike a balance between witty and sincere, confident but approachable. It was a difficult task, one that left me feeling like a social media influencer who couldn't quite decide on her brand. With each word I typed, the gravity of the situation weighed heavier. This was the first impression, my only shot at capturing the attention of someone who might be my future partner. Choosing photos felt like selecting the right filter for an Instagram post. Important, but ultimately futile, in the grand scheme of things. I dug through the archives of my camera roll, each picture a memory that made me smile or cringe. The smiling group shots with friends, the solo selfies where I'd caught the perfect angle, the candid moments of laughter, all the reminders of the person I was and the person I wanted others to see. Finally, my profile complete, I hesitated, my finger hovering over the submit button. A mix of excitement and trepidation coursed through me, like a roller coaster's first stomach-dropping descent. With a deep breath, I tapped submit and plunged into the world of Swipe Right. With my profile live, it was time to dive into the sea of faces, swiping left or right like a cyber cupid armed with a touchscreen instead of a bow. The first few profiles blurred together, a cacophony of smiling faces, gym selfies, and travel photos that left me feeling overwhelmed. I wondered if I'd find someone, or if I was destined to remain adrift in the digital sea. As I swiped left and right, judging each profile with a mix of guilt and curiosity, I stumbled upon one that struck a chord of familiarity. The man's face, framed by messy dark hair and a lopsided grin, tugged at the fringes of my memory, beckoning me to remember. Could it be? Had we gone on a date back in my early 20s? I squinted at the screen, racking my brain for any recollection of him. An uncomfortable sense of déjà vu washed over me like an itch I couldn't quite reach. But try as I might, I couldn't shake the feeling that I knew him from somewhere. Was it worth the risk, the potential embarrassment of swiping right and reopening a door that had been closed for years? After a moment's contemplation, I swiped left, sending him into the digital abyss, never to be seen again. So I continued my quest for love on Swipe Right, the app that held the key to my future, or perhaps just another heartache. The next day, as I swiped through profiles like a gambler shuffling through a deck of cards, the familiar face reappeared. My heart clenched with the anxiety, the knot of tension tightening like a noose around my throat. The question of how I knew him burned in my mind, an ember refusing to be snuffed out. I studied his photos, searching for a clue, a hint of our shared history. The beach shot with friends, the one where he held his guitar, and the candid laughter of a man who seemed so genuine. All of these images taunted me, whispering that I should know him, that I should remember him. And yet there was something sinister lurking behind the surface, a shadow that seemed to cling to him like a second skin. The unsettling sensation grew stronger, and the looming fear that I couldn't trust my instincts clawed at my insides. I hesitated, my finger hovering over his profile like a moth drawn to a flame. The longer I stared, the more nervous I became. Something about him, about this unknown man with the too familiar face. Well, it felt wrong, like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. And so with a shuddering breath, I swiped left on him for the second time, banishing him from my digital realm, hoping to rid myself of the disquiet that he'd brought to my life. But even as I continued my search for love on swipe right, the image of that man and the question of how I knew him threatened to consume me. For days, I went through profile after profile, each one a stranger, a potential new beginning. Yet the memory of that man with the familiar face loomed in the depths of my thoughts like a shadow I couldn't shake off. And then, like a reoccurring nightmare, his profile appeared in my feed for the third time. This could not be a coincidence, could it? I had to sort this mystery out to find out why he kept reappearing in my life. With my resolve hardened, I started a live chat with Swipe Right's customer support, determined to report the profile and perhaps get some answers. A friendly representative named Sarah greeted me. "Hello, Ms. Cooper." Her typed words a beacon of hope in a dark sea of uncertainty. I explained the situation, trying to convey the urgency without sounding hysterical. A moment went by as Sarah read my chat message, and with empathy shining through the screen, she suggested it could be a glitch in the system and asked for a link for the man's profile so she could investigate further. I quickly copied the link and sent it to her, my fingers trembling with anticipation. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah replied, her words like a punch to the gut. "The link you've provided leads to a deleted user," she wrote. Her confusion was clear. "I'm afraid I can't determine who the man is or why his profile keeps appearing in your feed." My heart sank like a stone, the mystery of the man with the familiar face only deepening. I thanked Sarah for her help, though I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, something beyond a mere glitch in the system. Determined to get answers, I resolved to screenshot his profile if it appeared again. I would gather evidence in order to unravel the truth behind the man who continued to occupy my digital existence. Days passed, each swipe on Swipe Right a step further into the unknown, and the man's profile remained conspicuously absent. I questioned myself to wonder if I'd imagined the whole thing. Perhaps my loneliness had finally taken its toll, and this was a case of self-sabotage. And then, after nearly a week, he reappeared. The familiar face that had become an obsession, a riddle I needed to solve. With shaking hands, I took a screenshot of his profile, preserving the enigma in digital form. My heart raced as I stared at the image, the next step in my search for answers, both exhilarating and terrifying. Over the next 3 days, the man's profile appeared in my feed with eerie consistency. Each time I took a screenshot and swiped left, my determination to uncover the truth growing stronger. The screenshots were my evidence, the key to unraveling the mystery that had consumed me. With a collection of images now at my disposal, I turned to my laptop, intent on sending them to the customer support team via the email provided for reporting profiles. As I pulled up the screenshots, I meticulously checked that each one had captured the date and time. But as I studied the images, I noticed something strange. In each photo, there were subtle differences in the backgrounds. It was as if they had been taken in the same place, but in different areas of the room. The man's face remained unchanged, the same familiar grin that had plagued me for days, but the background told a different story. I realized the situation was even more bizarre than I had initially thought. The discrepancies in the photos added another layer to the puzzle, another piece that didn't quite fit. What does this all mean? Who is this man, and why does he seem to exist in a constant state of flux? And at that moment, I held off emailing the support team. I needed more screenshots, more evidence to piece together the enigma that had become my obsession. If there were differences in the backgrounds, perhaps further analysis would reveal a pattern or a clue. With renewed determination, I continued swiping on swipe right, each day bringing a new screenshot, a new piece of the puzzle. The man with the familiar face had become more than just a curiosity. He was a riddle that demanded to be solved, and I couldn't rest until I had found the truth. The next day, as expected, the man's profile reappeared in my feed. My hands, now steady with determination, snapped another screenshot before I swiped left. I opened the image on my laptop, scouring the details for any clue that might help me solve the mystery. As I inspected the picture closely, my eyes were drawn to a face in the background. It looked familiar, almost like the one I had in my apartment. An antique, given to me by my grandmother. The vase had sentimental value, an intricate design and unique shape, a testament to my family's history. My heart raced as I darted to the living room, my eyes locking onto the vase sitting on the shelf. I studied it and then glanced back at the screenshot on my laptop. The resemblance was uncanny. A cold shiver ran down my spine as a chilling realization dawned on me. The man with the familiar face wasn't just a digitized delusion. He had a connection to my life, to my very home. Questions swirled my mind, the implications of this new discovery overwhelming. How could he have a vase so similar to mine? And was it mere coincidence or something more sinister? How and what did this all mean? With each new piece of evidence, the puzzle grew more complex, the stakes higher. The man with the familiar face was no longer just a digital enigma. He had breached the barrier between the virtual and the real, his presence in my life becoming more tangible with every passing day. My search for love had become a distant memory, replaced by the burning desire to solve the mystery of the man with the familiar face. The days blurred together as I continued my investigation, the world of swipe right becoming the backdrop for the mystery that consumed me. With each new appearance of the man's profile, I took screenshots, searching for clues hidden within the images like a digital detective. With each new appearance of the man's profile, I took screenshots, searching for clues hidden within the images like a digital detective. This time, there was a woman sitting on the couch, partially obscured, her legs and dress visible in the corner of the picture, and I squinted, my heart pounding as I tried to make sense of the new detail. As I looked closer, there seemed to be something familiar about the woman, this nagging feeling that I had seen her before. Perhaps I even knew her, but I couldn't quite place her. I couldn't remember where our paths might have crossed. The sense of deja vu intensified, a thread that connected the man with the familiar face and the enigmatic woman in the background. With each new discovery, the puzzle grew more intricate, the stakes higher. The man with the familiar face and the woman on the couch were no longer just digital phantoms. They were a part of my life. My quest for answers became a desperate pursuit, a race against time as I delved deeper into the mystery. I analyzed the images with meticulous attention to detail. My laptop screen, a canvas of digital breadcrumbs that I hoped would lead me to the truth. I studied the woman's legs and dress, searching my memory for any clue that might help me identify her. The familiarity gnawed at me, a relentless itch that demanded to be scratched. Was she a friend, a relative, an acquaintance from my past? I racked my brain, frustration mounting as the answer remained just out of reach. As I parsed through profiles on Swipe Right, my initial mission to find love had become a distant memory, replaced by the burning sensation to uncover the truth behind the man with the familiar face and the mysterious woman in the background. I took a screenshot, swiped left, and counted the hours until the man would show up in my feed again. For 2 days, I obsessively checked my phone notifications like a parched wanderer in the desert, desperately seeking an oasis. Then, on my 3rd day, the notification finally came. My heart raced as I saw the little red dot appear on my screen. I opened up Swipe Right, and there was the man I had swiped left on countless times staring back at me. But this time, the woman from the couch was now standing next to him, her face digitally blurred but unmistakable in her proximity to the man. It was the same woman, her presence in the photo sending a shiver down my spine. I recognized the dress the woman was wearing. It looked exactly like one I had in my closet. And with my pulse pounding in my ears, I rushed to retrieve the dress, a frantic energy propelling me forward. I had purchased the floral pattern dress at a department store, and it was entirely possible for someone else to own the same one. The striking dress, adorned with vibrant red flowers, was undeniably eye-catching. However, I had never been fond of the buttons that originally decorated the front of it, so I had replaced them with a unique set, giving the garment a personal touch. Clutching my dress, I returned to the laptop, my hands shaking as I compared it to the one in the photo. My breath caught in my throat as I realized the buttons matched. The woman in the photo was wearing the dress I had customized, the one that hung in my closet. The realization hit me like a freight train. The woman in the photo was me. As panic set in, my chest tightened and my breaths came in shallow gasps. The memories began flowing fast, relentless and vivid snippets of image and feelings that battered my mind like a storm. I remembered swiping right on his profile, feeling the flutter of excitement and the prospect of meeting someone new. The sound of the doorbell ringing as I walked to the door, my heart pounding in anticipation. Ordering a meal in a fancy restaurant, the warm glow of candlelight flickering across the table. I saw myself seated in the passenger of a car saying thank you as a man closed the door behind me, the touch of his lips as we kissed, my voice inviting him up to my apartment. Then the memories took a dark turn. I felt pain and overwhelming fear for my life as someone assaulted me, the blows raining down like a hailstorm of violence. The memories kept coming, each one more horrifying than the last. I remembered everything. I had met him through Swipe Right, gone on a date with him, and invited him to my apartment. It was there that he brutally assaulted me, his actions a twisted betrayal of the trust I had placed in him. I woke up in the trunk of his car, my body battered and bruised, my spirit shattered. I remembered him taking me out of the trunk and leaving me for dead, a discarded plaything tossed aside without a second thought. As the panic threatened to overwhelm me, a calming voice cut through the chaos, pulling me back from the abyss.
I'd like you to start focusing on your breath. Inhale deeply and exhale slowly, allowing the sensation of the air entering and leaving your body to anchor you back in the present moment. As I count from 1 to 5, you'll gradually become more and more aware of your surroundings, feeling refreshed and revitalized with each number. 1. Gently bring your attention to your body, noticing the sensation of the chair or couch supporting you. Feel the connection between your body and the surface beneath you. 2. Begin to notice the sounds around you, both inside and outside the room. 3. Feel a gentle, invigorating energy flowing through your body, as if a soft light is illuminating every cell, bringing you increased clarity and focus. 4. Take another deep breath, feeling even more present now, alert and awake. Begin to gently move your fingers and your toes, reintegrating your body with your conscious awareness. And 5. When you're ready, slowly open your eyes, feeling fully awake, refreshed, and grounded in the present moment.
As the tidal wave of memories subsided, I opened my eyes, blinking back the tears that threatened to spill over. I found myself in a psychiatry office, the soothing voice belonging to the doctor seated across from me. He studied me with a mix of concern and relief, his pen poised above the notepad as he prepared to continue our session.
Do you remember your name?
He asked gently, his eyes searching mine for any sign of recognition. The fog of amnesia had lifted, the truth now etched into my consciousness like a scar that would never fade. My name is Amanda Cooper, I replied, my voice shaky but certain. And I can identify the man who tried to kill me. Okay, it's official. I'm never using a dating app to meet men again.
Well, that's one way to avoid accidentally swiping right on your cousin again.
Oh my god, I told you it's not actually
Elizabeth, I must inform you that engaging in romantic relationships with close relatives, such as cousins, can lead to an increased risk of genetic disorders in any offspring that may result from such a relationship.
Not actually my cousin. Okay, I'm changing the subject. We need another story, little guy.
Yeah, Mr. AI Roboto, I'd like to hear a horror story, about a man who encounters a strange figure while working nights as a bus driver.
Generating.
It was a cold, foggy night as I drove my usual route through the desolate streets of my sleepy town. I'd been a bus driver for 34 years, or as I'd like to say, for as long as I could remember, and I knew every curve and bend of these roads like the back of my hand. Which was lucky, as tonight the dim headlights of the bus barely penetrated into the thick fog, which seemed to swallow up the world around us. The night had been uneventful, with only a handful of passengers boarding and disembarking throughout the evening. As I approached the last stop, the bus was empty except for a single passenger, a dark and menacing figure that had been sitting silently in the back since I first picked them up. I pulled up to the final stop, the brakes hissing as the bus came to a halt. The fog seemed to cling to the windows as if trying to keep us trapped inside. I looked at the rearview mirror and saw the figure still sitting there, unmoving. I couldn't make out any discernible features, just the dark silhouette and the penetrating gaze that seemed to bore into my very soul. "Last stop!" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Time to get off!" The figure didn't respond. They just sat there staring at me. "Sir, this is the last stop. You need to get off the bus now," I said, with a bit more force. I tried to not let my misgivings show, but something about the stranger set my nerves on edge. Still, the figure didn't move. I rose from my seat and slowly walked down the aisle towards the stranger. The silence in the bus was deafening, and I could feel the fog pressing in, as if it were a living entity trying to suffocate us. "Sir, you need to leave," I said, standing just a few feet away from him. "This is the end of the line." The figure finally stirred, turning its head to face me. Its eyes seemed to glow in the darkness, and a chill ran down my spine as it locked its gaze with mine. It slowly rose, towering above me, and I found myself taking a step back involuntarily.
You think this is the end?
The figure said, its voice deep and guttural, like the growl of a wild animal.
Oh no, my friend. This is just the beginning.
I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead as I stumbled backwards again, nearly tripping over my own feet. The figure laughed, a sound that echoed through the empty bus and reverberated in my skull. It took a step towards me, and I could feel the air around me growing colder, as if the figure was draining the warmth from the very atmosphere. I tried to call out for help, but my voice was strangled in my throat. The figure drew closer, and I could see that its features were not human. Its face was a twisted, dark mass, with eyes that seemed to burn with a churning fire. I could feel the malevolence emanating from it, a sense of evil that weighed heavily on me.
For you, I am death.
It said, its voice now a sinister whisper.
For others, I am life, and I am inevitable as the coming of the tide.
I desperately tried to think of a way to escape, my mind racing as the figure closed the gap between us. My instincts kicked in and I lunged for the emergency exit, yanking the handle with all my strength. The doors swung open and the cold, damp air of the night rushed in. The figure let out an enraged howl as I leapt from the bus and sprinted into the fog. I could hear it giving chase, its footsteps pounding behind me. I knew the streets well, and I hoped my knowledge of the town would give me an advantage. I ran for what felt like hours, my lungs burning and my legs growing weak. The fog was thicker than ever, and I could barely see the ground in front of me. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out the sound of the figure's pursuit. Finally, I stumbled upon the town's church, its steeple barely visible through the fog. I pushed open the heavy doors and stumbled inside, collapsing on the floor, gasping for air. The church seemed empty, and I did my best to look around as I tried to catch my breath. The once tranquil sanctuary now felt like a battleground, and I was on the front lines. I watched with a growing sense of dread as the shadow of my pursuer drifted past the stained glass windows, the distorted silhouette looming large and sinister in the dim light. The vibrant hues of the stained glass took on a darker, more sinister tone in the presence of this ethereal being. I pressed my back against the cold, stone walls of the church, my eyes darting from window to window, trying to anticipate where the figure would appear next. The shadows cast by the church's interior seemed to twist and writhe as if the darkness outside was seeping into the very heart of the sanctuary. I knew I couldn't rely on the church's protection forever. I needed to find something, anything that could be used as a weapon against the terrifying creature that haunted me. My hands finally found a knife tucked away in a drawer in the small sacristy. It wasn't much, but it was better than facing the figure unarmed. Gripping the knife tightly, I readied myself, my knuckles turning white from the pressure. I scanned my surroundings, my gaze never lingering too long on one spot, waiting for the moment that the figure would attempt to enter the sacred space. My throat knotted as the first knock sounded at the church door. The knock quickly turned into a pounding, a relentless assault on the heavy wooden door that seemed to reverberate through the entire building. My heart raced, fear and adrenaline coursing through my veins as I braced myself for the inevitable confrontation. The pounding grew louder, more insistent, and it felt as if the very walls of the church were trembling in response. The knocks expanded. They grew louder, and they began to come from all sides. It felt as if the entire church was under siege, the walls and the windows rattling with the force of the blows. It went on like this for hours, but the exhaustion began to creep in, overwhelming me with a bone-deep weariness I couldn't shake. I knew I couldn't fight the creature alone, and the church seemed to be my only refuge. My legs gave way beneath me, and I sank to the floor, the knife slipping from my trembling fingers. The incessant pounding continued, an endless assault on my senses, but my body could no longer fight the pull of sleep. As I drifted into unconsciousness, the knocks and slams merged into the background, a distant drumbeat that accompanied my descent into darkness. When I awoke the next morning, I was disoriented and confused. The pounding had ceased, but the church was bathed in a warm, golden light filtering through the stained glass windows, blinking against the brightness. I realized that I was no longer alone. A priest stood over me, a look of concern etched on his kindly face. "Are you all right, my son?" he asked, helping me to my feet. "You must have had quite a night." I nodded, my memories of the harrowing ordeal still vivid and terrifying. I found my phone on the sidewalk outside, and I saw several texts from my work. They had located and picked up the abandoned bus, and concern for my well-being was evident in their words. As I stood there in the sanctuary, still reeling from the nightmare that had unfolded, I decided it was time to retire from my job as a bus driver and to dedicate my life to protecting my community from the sinister force that had apparently invaded our peaceful town.
Wait, that's it? What happened after he retired? What about the creature? Certainly there's got to be more to the story than that.
Elizabeth, that's all we have time for today.
He's right, we are out of time for today's episode. Thanks for tapping in, and please join us again next week for more AI horror stories. And if you can't possibly wait for next week, please go check us out on patreon.com/AI horror stories, where you can find bonus content, additional episodes, ad-free and early episodes, and more, just for the low price of, you'll have to go find out. See you next week on AI horror stories.
You'll have to go find out. To go find out. To go find out. To go find out.